Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Anybody, anyone else? Oh, you are a journalist in
No, I'm not. I'm a student.
MSSR.
I'm internship, doing internship.
Yeah, I remember. Okay. Anyone else? No. This is basically a sort of framework. Anybody can use this framework to make a state of the environment report of any ecosystem, or a state, or a panchayat, or a district, whatever domain you select. This framework can be used, and then you can prepare what exactly is the state of the environment in that particular ecosystem or domain, and then plan accordingly as to what should we do to mitigate the sort of impacts or problems in that area, or make use of that ecosystem in a much better way if it is not being used that way. So basically, if you look at when we use this framework, what we do is actually first we find out the environmental issues of the domain or the ecosystem, whatever it is. Here we talk about the river ecosystem. Certain gram panchayats do use this. The state government of India had a program, or even now they prepare state of the environment report at the national level. The nodal agencies, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So they prepare once in 4 years or 5 years the state of the environment report. They also desire that all the states do prepare the state of the environment report. There was an exercise, thereby all the states have prepared the state of the environment. In Kerala, we have started preparing a state of the environment report for gram panchayats also, to identify their exact problems and then bring out action plan so that environment is protected, making use of those action plans. In this procedure, basically, first step is to identify the environmental problems in a domain or an ecosystem. Once we identify those issues, then why those issues? There may be certain human intervention or natural reason for that particular issue. So we identify the reason for that environmental issue or the driving force of that environmental issue. So that is where the D comes, driving force. Secondly, once we have the driving force, a particular problem is due to this issue or this activity. So that driving force, if it is identified, what are the causative pressure on the natural or societal environment due to that driving force? We will get into doing how we can understand this in more detail. Now I'll explain the procedure. Then third step is to assess the state or the condition of the environment, extent of changes inflicted on various environmental aspects. What are the environmental aspects? Any idea? Anybody can tell some environmental aspects? When we do environmental assessment or analysis, we divide environmental scenario into different aspects, isn't it? Pardon? Biological, physical, chemical, or one can say land, water, biological, social. So like that we can identify the different environmental aspects, and how if the driving force is acting on that, and that because of the driving force, if there is a pressure on the environmental system, and at present what is the state due to that pressure on the environmental system or environmental aspect, that we identify. Then once we understand the state of the environment, then we also look at the impacts, assess the impacts. What are the implications of the environmental driving force, due to which a pressure is created on the environmental aspect, and presently the state of that environment is like this, and because of that, these sort of actions, what are the impacts on the various environmental aspects like ecological, economic, social and health aspects of environment. So there could be, the impact could be beneficial or adverse, impact could be reversible or irreversible, impact could be short term and long term. these are the types of impact which can cause. So then, based on this, we can prioritize the sort of impacts which do more adverse impact or which generate more beneficial impact and things like that, based on which, depending on the requirement, we can prioritize the impact. And prioritizing impact is mainly for managing the system, managing the impact or mitigating the impact. If you know a particular impact is dominating or that is the most priority impact on that ecological system, so naturally we can find out ways and means to mitigate that system. So whichever impacts is more dominant or more adverse in nature or more irreversible in nature or more long-term in nature, which causes much more damage than the beneficial, reversible or short-term, then we look for any sort of mitigation is possible or not. Like that, depending on the priority, we look at the different type of impacts and then try finding out mitigation measures. Those mitigation measures are converted to programs and projects so that we implement those programs and projects and then rectify or rejuvenate the ecosystem by mitigating the environmental impacts. And that mitigation or that action that we take to mitigate the impacts is called response. So these responses are normally taken up to mitigate whatever impacts we identify. So this is the procedure. So first we identify the problems. Secondly, we look at why these problems have caused or the reason for the problems, that is driving force. Thirdly, we look at if the driving force is acting on the environment system, what is the sort of pressure or what is the magnitude and intensity with which the pressure is acting on the environmental system. Then we say at present how the environmental system is converted into and what are the impacts which has caused the problems to the environment and the type of impacts, and based on which we design the sort of mitigation plans, and then mitigation plans are converted to programs and projects which are called responses, which are implemented, which are called responses. So thereby we generate the state of the environment of that particular ecosystem or particular domain. Could you follow this procedure? Okay. Then next, we can look at an example. See, one of the examples which readily came to my mind is the air pollution in Delhi, which everybody knows because through newspapers and the visual media and all. You must have heard of it. Anybody who has not heard of the air pollution issue in Delhi? Nobody has heard? No, so okay. And I asked negative questions, okay. So what are the driving forces? The problem is air pollution in Delhi. Then you look at the driving force. Why it is caused? Why this air pollution in Delhi is due to? Yeah, automobiles are there. Then what? Yeah, burning is an issue. There is no wind force. Okay. So there is no assimilative capacity to assimilate that environmental system do not have adequate assimilative capacity to assimilate the pollution. Okay, fine. Then transport and industry. Okay. So let us put it all together. Because industry has got protocols to be complied with so that it doesn't generate air pollution. If an industry is coming up there, then it has to take adequate measures to mitigate the air pollution. Okay, that is there. We have got adequate legal adequate enforcement protocols to see that industry do not pollute our environment. But that many people do not comply with those sort of protocols. So non-compliance of industry, similarly the transportation protocol, etc. So like that, as he said, the lowering of assimilative capacity, the non-compliance of industry, then transport protocol, etc. are the driving forces due to which this problem is coming up. Now, what is the pressure? It generates pressure of inhalation difficulties, irritation to eyes, reduced carrying capacity, etc. Agreed. So, if there is the pollution is beyond the assimilative capacity or beyond the carrying capacity of that particular area, naturally we cannot live there. It is very difficult to live there. It creates irritation, it creates health problems. We don't feel like going there, isn't it? We don't feel like getting out to that particular area. So, that is the sort of pressure on the environment. Then the third, the state of enhanced pollutant concentration, high particulate matter, undesirable concentration of gaseous emissions, etc. Or the government also, or the pollution control board, bring out in certain junctions, etc., especially in ITO and places like that, you can see big boards showing that what is the sort of gaseous emission level on that particular day at particular time. What is the sort of the particulate matter emission a particular time and particular day. So these sort of magnitude of emission are there, and we have fixed a certain limit for emission standards. So if it is beyond that limit, we say that it is highly pollutant or very extremely pollutant and moderately pollutant, appreciable, and things like that. So now, so that determines the state. The magnitude of the pollutant concentration in air determines the state of air pollution. Now, what are the impacts it can cause? It can cause health of human. It can cause impacts on health of human and ecosystem and visibility. See, visibility reduces, ecosystem stop functioning properly. The societal impacts is very significant. So like that, there are different types of impact which you will be able to note down. Some of the impacts will be very short term. Some of the impacts will be most of the impacts will be reversible, provided there is a change in the atmospheric parameters like wind and things like that. Reversal, the distance between the surface and cloud, etc. No, these are all act on that air pollution concentration. So naturally, such impacts could be mitigated by change in the natural environment of that area. So now, what are the responses that government or any other agency can think of on a short-term and long-term basis? On short-term basis, they immediately lock down the city. Advisories are issued to people not to bring out their vehicles outside, or they should not come out of the street and things like that. And certain of the industry itself gets locked down. Then temporary reduction of vehicular traffic. You must have heard of a vehicle, the sort of enforcement that single number vehicles should be plying on one day, then double this thing like. So like some short-term measures they take. Then stringent checking of vehicular and industrial pollution. These are the sort of long-term and short-term responses that. So depends on how better responses we take up, the sort of issue can be. So thereby we just prepared a state of the environment of air environment in Delhi by defining the driving force, by defining the pressure, defining the state, defining the impacts and the sort of responses. So that gives a direction to any planning organization to prepare a plan to overcome the sort of environmental issue called air pollution on a long-term basis. So this is what the use of state of the environment, making use of DPSIR format. Now, so what are the other measures now, like executive actions to improve pollution control measures, legislative measures to modify the pollution control norms, strengthen institutional mechanism for stringent enforcement. Maybe you will have to have more people on the road to check the vehicles and all. You may have to have better instrumental system for monitoring the air pollution, things like that. Then zoning of urban area, incorporating green zones and mandatory provision. You know that the leaves, etc., absorb a lot of air pollutants, especially the larger leaves. What is it called?
Broadleaf.
Broad leaves, with some eh? No, the larger surface, the trees with leaves with larger surface area absorb more pollutants.
Foliage.
Ah,
Foliage.
yeah, foliage. So that absorbs. So naturally, the zoning of the urban area with the green zones, etc., where a lot of trees comes up and which reduces. Of course, Delhi is known for that. A lot of green zones have come up. A lot of trees are being planted there. They are nurtured, and but then that is not adequate enough in a place like that. Then increasing avenue trees, vegetated areas, and conservation of natural regions. Enforcement of green building codes, which also causes quite a lot of emission of particulate matter and things like that. So these are the sort of responses that they could plan and implement. So this is how the DPSIR, using DPSIR format, we prepare a state of the environment of air environment in Delhi, and also prepare responses in brief. So could you get this example into your mind? Understood, no? Okay. Now we should get into the river ecosystem. What is that we expect from a river ecosystem? Basically, 4 major categories of services. This probably yesterday also Ajayakumar, or same slide he must have shown. The first service that we expect from a river ecosystem is the supporting service. That is, benefits that sustains natural process like photosynthesis, nutrient cycling, formation of soils, water cycles, etc. So that allows Earth to sustain itself with its basic life forms. That is very essential. Without supporting services on an ecosystem, no other services of the ecosystem need to be expected. If river ecosystem cannot provide the supporting services, it will not further provide you any sort of services, namely provisioning services or regulating service or cultural service, etc. I also given that what are the provisional services like for river ecosystem, like it provide water, food, building materials, medicinal benefits, etc. Then it regulates the water purification, waste decomposition by bacteria, pollination by bees of flowering, soil binding and erosion prevention through root system, flood control, etc. These are the sort of regulating services. And cultural services like non-material benefit that contributes to development and cultural advancement of people, such as recreation, serenity, aesthetics, etc. So you see, when you see a river, say those people who are sitting here, when the moment we see the river, always we feel that we want to go there and sit for some time, and a serenity in a very which provide a very aesthetic sense to us. So that sort of recreation aspects are called cultural services from a river ecosystem. So these are the four services that we could expect from a river ecosystem. And all our exercise of river health management is to see that we get all these services, all the 4 services in a much proper or appropriate manner. We need all these services from an ecosystem, especially in river ecosystem, to see that the environment sustains or sustainable development continues. So ensuring that these services sustains, we need to have the river health managed. Now let us get into the Pamba River, where we are sitting on the banks of Pamba River. For an example, can anybody identify where we are sitting? In which part of the river? Can anyone come and then show me in the Sarvaranda? You are from here. Anyone? Fast, because we do not have. It is here is Chenganur. Yeah.
We are almost here.
How did you identify that?
Because this is the source region of the river, and I visited river couple of times yesterday, and I saw how broad that river is here. That shows the stage of the river in this region.
But
so it
see, when
shows
you
that
travel west only, you reach Chenganur. This is west, and that is east. That is north. So map is there, na? On north, it is here. So this is west side. So now you say that here, so that means you are yet to reach Chenganur.
Okay.
So it's not your wrong. Anybody else? Can anybody locate yourself here? Somebody is saying youngsters are so many youngsters. You should read map. Come on, Jen, try your luck. I will commence my talk only after somebody comes here and lecture. How did you identify that?
It is exactly in between. That is what everybody was saying. It is. So it should be somewhere here. But yeah, it is not in deltas definitely. So it should be somewhere in between, not on the hilly areas. Where
Yesterday, how many people went along with him? Did you go with him yesterday?
Yes.
Yes. And if one of you can come and then I gave a clue.
There was one more river. So this is one.
So here, you could have seen here. So there is a diversion here. There is a river, there is a course diversion here.
Okay.
So we are somewhere here. Okay. Okay. It's okay. No, that's. So now, this river, this is the drainage network of the river. The river drains a basin, which shows a very severe constriction at this place. Entire collection catchment area is here, and water is collected and then flow. And when it comes here, it is a very severe constriction, and then it spreads out. Is there any impact due to this constriction? I'm just drifting away from this thing, but then have you seen a marking there, the flood level? Yes. Why the flood has happened there in this particular region? Narrow area. So this constriction has led to very severe impact of flood in this particular area, especially both up to this portion from here. These were the area which was very severely affected during the 2018 floods. But then, however, the map I showed, one of the main function of the river yesterday, Dr. Patnalal must have told, it's the draining the area. So it takes water collected from the entire area and then start draining it. Thereby, that draining system actually provides the life support to the entire basin. So whenever we do not have that drainage system perfect, or whenever we spoil the drainage system, naturally the river course system function reduces. So this we should keep in mind. Now, yes.
Sir, see, if we see that entire map, I mean, I'm assuming that the top portion of the map might flood more because the catchment area is more. The amount of water reaching to that river is more than, because if I see this, it is not a district. It is a.
It's a basin, river basin.
It's a ridge, right?
These portion and these portions are ridges.
Yeah, ridges. So the amount reaching here
Ah.
is less compared to the larger area.
Collectively it's large.
Collectively is large. So the entire river, the water network is coming to this. But why only particular this location?
Now, why do you get, when you are opening the tap, you get water very forcefully? How do you get that?
Yeah, because of the pressure.
Because of
the
pressure.
lowest-
So that means you have a bigger pipe prior to the tap you use. So that bigger pipe brings more water, and we are letting that water to be coming out through a very small area,
So you
small
mean
pipe.
this all network system has become one channel now?
Naturally,
Yeah.
if there is a very small one single order stream, it comes to a second order stream, third order stream, fourth order stream like that, and then get into a seventh order river. So naturally, all this water collected together, every single stream is a watershed. So they collect water and then let it to the next higher order streams. So then in that order, the stream goes on becoming bigger and bigger, ultimately joins the river. So that's how it is. So that is why lot of water is collected because of the larger area, and because of the dredges, the river basin has reduced, the width of the basin has reduced. So naturally it put lot of pressure. If there is a very high rainfall on that, very high intensity rainfall at the area, always these areas are resting. And another aspect is also there. If you look at these areas, Pamba river, these areas, further this area, the floodplain is very, very wide. Pamba has a problem like this. That floodplain is large because of the constriction here, because more water gets spread out. And those floodplains, when we are filling that floodplains, naturally the impact will be much more. That's a different story. Let us not get into that. Anyway, this is the drainage network, and the health of this drainage system is very, very important in getting the ecosystem service of the river. Now let us look at the characteristics of river Pamba. Just briefly, probably yesterday and all, some people must have told you. I felt that it is necessary. See, it is a 7th order stream. What is 7th order stream? 7th order stream, when I say 7th order, what does it indicate? Yeah. How do a river form? Yeah, when there is a rainfall outside this building, naturally you will see that rainwater start flowing through preferred lines. So there are many such flows will come and join. That flow will go to a different flow. So like that, 7th level of flow becomes the river here. So naturally that is why 7th order, and it originates from a higher position near Shabarimala. Shabarimala you must have heard of. Then so many small streams join together to form this, about 2,200 square kilometers area with forest dominating. All the green cover is forest area. May not be thick forest now, but then these are all forest land. And mostly Pamba river basin, the forest is intact. And you can see the yellow gaps where there are interventions and encroachments. And the plantation is almost 9%, mixed crops and homesteads 32%. It's a peculiarity of this region, the Kerala region, that we have a homestead type of habitation. Every house has got a surrounding area where we do cultivation and things like that. All the materials are there, like wells and toilets and all those things. And also our cultivation practices surrounding that. So we call it as homestead system. So about 32% are homestead mixed crop system. Settlement, pure settlement like buildings only in urban areas 5%. And water body, because there are a couple of, there are many water reservoirs, it occupies about 3%. So like this is the situation this river provides. Huge sediment discharge happens because it drains a large area, almost about 1,17,000 tons of discharge happen every year. The groundwater availability is significant, whereas the development is much low, only about 35%, so it is intact. But then in portions, it has also got problems which we come into. So these are the land use, land cover. And one of the major problem now is the declining trend of river flow. Even during the monsoon season, the upper portion, the blue line, is a monsoon season flow. You can see the trend is declining. So over the long term, the flow in the river is coming down. Even during the lean flow season also it is coming down. It's a very interesting thing, even irrespective of the fact that the rainfall is not reducing considerably, but then the flow is reducing considerably. That is all due to the sort of problems that we created for the ecosystem. Now if you look at the water balance in 2015 and 2025, the 25 is a projected one. We can see that in 2025 the annual water balance was plus. That is, there used to be a surplus water during the all through the year. Monsoon especially, almost about 1,864 million cubic meter surplus was there. non-monsoon there was a small, very small deficit of minus 20 million cubic meter. Whereas when you project it based on with using data, we find that by 2025 there will be severe water deficit in the river basin. That is, it reduces to almost minus 1308 million cubic meter and 1144 million cubic meter during monsoon and 2511 million cubic meter non-monsoon. The non-monsoon water requirement increases very, very significantly in the coming years. That is mainly due to increasing requirement of flushing, because that shows that the river is getting polluted severely. Unless and until we dilute this, there is no other mechanism now present. There is no cleansing mechanism of river present. So naturally, it has to have the natural process of cleansing, that is dilution. So the water required for diluting the sort of pollutant that get into the river is very huge. Thereby, we will have a very huge water deficit in this particular river basin by 2025. This is the sort of scenario we have. And when you look at the water quality index, probably Ajayakumar must have told you yesterday, almost 62% show very poor quality. There are no Class A or Class B water, no sample shows Class A or Class B standards. The best standard that shows is Class C, that is 45% of the sample collected shows Class C. That means we can use the water for drinking with disinfection or boiling. Then Class D, it could be used for other irrigation purposes and things like that. And Class C water is almost about 13%. This is the sort of status of Pamba River. Now get into DPSIR. So we have the background of the Pamba River system. Now let us look at what are the most conspicuous environmental problems. Probably you may recollect the talks that you heard yesterday and day before yesterday. I am listing out some of the issues. One is damages to luxuriant riparian vegetation. It's a real problem. So yesterday you must have heard Dr. Shaji and others talking about the loss of riparian vegetation. Then indiscriminate land use practice in the catchment. Because of that, if you are not using proper land use, naturally the soil erosion will increase. There will be landslide sort of situations, flood will increase. So such indiscriminate land use will have severe impact on the river ecosystem. Then arbitrary landform modification, like you do not have a plan as to how the landform should be managed. So thereby, say the landform where you should have only perennial vegetation, they may cut the perennial vegetation and start cultivating seasonal crops like tapioca and such other crops. So naturally that leads to again soil erosion and such other impacts. Then the overuse of fertilizers and pesticides because of more production one we expect. So naturally you trigger the soil with fertilizers and pesticides to increase the productivity. Then increasing soil erosion and loss of soil. Then riverbank erosion and failure. Then indiscriminate sand mining, clay mining, quarrying, probably Dr. Patmalal must have told you in detail that. Then modification of river channel incision, engineering structures, etc. You must have, yesterday you were taken to some place where you found that the river is, earlier the river was flowing in that way, now it has started flowing this way. So that sort of modification of river channel takes place. It may be due to natural reason as well as it can also be due to man-made reasons. Then lowering trend of river discharge flow. I showed you a graph which shows the lowering trend. And accumulation of solid waste, littering, indiscriminate disposal, mismanagement of medical waste, discharge of sewage, septage and fecal sludge, due to which this water pollution takes place. And we have seen, and yesterday you heard Ajayakumar talking about the deteriorated water quality of river Pamba and other rivers in many places of the country. Pamba River is also polluted mainly due to the sort of disposal of waste and sewage and things like that, because we do not have proper sewage treatment plants, etc., even in the urban areas. Then reduction of phytoplankton and zooplankton. Probably Biju Kumar must have talked to you, and tomorrow when you go to field also you will discuss on these aspects. Then declining fishery resource, saltwater intrusion in the lower reaches. Of course, there we have made an intervention to prevent saltwater intrusion, but then there are certain conflicts of interest and things like that. And waterlogging due to siltation, weed infestation, infestation of aquatic microphytes. So these are some of the issues that I have listed. There you could list much more than what I have listed. If you study the ecosystem in more detail, so you will be able to list out more. So this is the first step, that we have identified the environmental issues of the river Pamba river ecosystems. And from here we start. Now, because of that ecosystem, you know, there are a lot of floods and things like that. Then pollution problems are there. Then it goes and joins the Vembanad Lake, where the impact is very severe. This sort of almost a sort of extreme impacts is going to happen to Lake Vembanad because of the interventions and poor management of the river ecosystem. You can look at the data where the intervention started in 1880 by constructing embouldering Padasegarams, because during those days we had severe food shortage. To overcome that, we have reclaimed a portion of the Vembanad Lake into paddy cultivating field, and thereby a lot of land has been lost. The ecosystem got spoiled. Then now the shrinking Vembanad is almost about 40% by area and 65% by depth. Almost average 6.7 meter depth was there for Vembanad in the olden days. Now it has come down to 4.4 meter average, but then there are many areas where the depth is very, very minimum. Then that is mainly because of the inflow of sediments to the lake. Almost about 32 million tons per year of sediments flow into Vembanad through these rivers. There are 5 rivers joining Vembanad. Pamba is the biggest river, so naturally it may be taking more sediments. And sediments are flowing because we do not have proper catchment protection. So sediment flows, and sedimentation rate in the lake is almost about 0.65 to 1.14 centimeter per year. So if you project it, naturally one can say that in another 50 years there will be a virtual disappearance of the lake. The lake will become a mud flat. So that is going to happen if we do not. So if the lake lake has to be protected, which provide a lot of environmental services to the almost about 1/3 of the state, naturally need to be protected. It is very essential for the survival of the human being as well as the other ecosystem life. It has to be protected. But then the sort of damage that we are doing currently, it is going to we are going to have a virtual disappearing. To prevent that, we need to protect these rivers and manage the river health in a proper way. So this is what is the most important objective, why we should have a better river health management system. So similarly, all the rivers will have certain impacts like this. We can look at, and then we can find out what is the most important objective of that river health management. Now, let us take one problem and then do this exercise. Yesterday, you must have heard of the sand mining in the river, and this is a portion of the river. What is the significance of this photograph? Anybody tell? Are you following my talk? No, because what is significance of this photograph? Somebody come. Whoever can, just get up and walk, I say. Why so lazy? People are so lazy. Come on. Yes. What is the significance of this photograph?
Here we can see there are a lot of fishing activities. I know some boat activities along with this, something like this truck is taking. It is used for the mining activities. They are taking care. It could be a clay, because I am not able to see the sand, but it could be they are taking some clay kind of stuff here.
Okay, agreed. Any other idea?
There is a
have some idea.
Sir,
Fast.
I think
Come on, fast.
they are removing the deposited clay.
Ah.
This helps to widening the river, and
Ah.
it's easy to water flow.
Okay.
This is
And
positive approach. My
No,
positive.
there is no vegetation in this side, and there is if they have this removed this side of vegetation, there is very low. And here it is as it is encroached. In this side, you will find less vegetation, and here is a very dense vegetation because it is uninterrupted.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Actually, this photograph was not communicated as what I wanted it to be communicated. Anyway, so what happens here is the rock is exposed. In a river system, only in the highest area you can see the rock exposed in a river system. Otherwise, what will be there? There will be sand. Okay. Why there is no mud? Mud flow when if the river flows, mud flows with the water. So sand only will be remaining there. But here the rock is exposed, so there is no sand. And whatever sand is there in patches, these people are taking it out. These boats are used to take out the remaining sand, whatever is there. There is no clay, there is no mud. The sand is totally removed, and and how much sand is removed? You can see the lady standing here. Can you see?
Yes.
And this depth. So almost about 6-7 meters. So earlier, even during the summer season, the river was there up to here. The river water was up to here, and now the river was flowing also. Now the river is not flowing because the entire sand is. Why it is so? This much of sand is being removed from the river, and the river stopped flowing. So you can understand the significance of sand. What is that significance? Storing the water. Because sand has got a very high porosity, so lot of water can be stored in sand. And when the normal water level goes down, that water start flowing, depending on the slope. And then that maintains the flow of the river. So this photograph shows the high sand mining in that area and how it impacted that river and deteriorated that river into such a shape. Now, this is an environmental issue, indiscriminate sand mining. And what are the driving forces of that? Tell us. Pardon? I couldn't hear you. Construction. Okay, construction. Why construction? Sand is used in construction. Okay. So, large scale construction using sand is one driving force. Anything else? Yeah, excessive use of excessive usage of sand as raw material for glass. Okay.
Navigation and transport. Navigation and transport.
Indiscriminate sand mining for navigation and transport. Of course, in some of the lower areas of a river stretch, it may be recent, but this river is not that type of river wherein we need to remove soil and then make way for transportation, because this is high velocity flow in this region, so naturally transportation is much less, and the river that type of deposition do not take place in this portion of the river. In the extreme lower side also such removal is not required, so that is not applicable to this river, but then in some rivers it is essential.
In the state of Goa, they will use casinos and other things.
Can you be a bit more louder?
Offshore casinos and all they use in the rivers.
Offshore
casinos.
Casinos in Goa.
For that they need navigation and all they.
Yeah, but then that is what I was telling. Here, this is a high velocity flow river, so naturally such deposition or removal of soil is not warranted for facilitating navigation. So this particular river is not required, but then what you said is correct, it's also a driving force. Anything else? So you have identified what are the driving forces. Now, what are the pressure? Pressure due to the driving force. That's a pressure or that's an impact? Okay. Okay. Tell me, somebody tell something. If it is wrong, others will tell wrong.
Increased sand level.
Pressure is on water that does not get percolate or
That,
store in the underground level of because of mining of sand, river can't hold water.
Ye-
Surface runoff increases.
the area, the volume, the places, the domain where the water has to be stored is not there. Okay. Is it a pressure or is it a impact? What sort of pressure the driving force has made on the environment? You said driving force is construction. Construction, what pressure the construction has made on the ecosystem or environment, that river?
Shrinks its space.
Amount of flows on river.
Ah,
Suppose we construct some dams like that, there is pressure to flow.
hmm.
Is it development that adds pressure?
Development is a holistic word, you know.
If the driving force is construction, pressure might be the amount of available thing in the river.
Ah,
That can be different.
okay.
Water velocity less.
Larger population now along the riverbanks. You're building housing, so more people are moving now within this area. So more population.
So, if the issue is if the environmental issue is mining, and if the driving force is construction, and if the construction continues, then the pressure is the reducing availability and increased extraction. Okay, increased extraction, reduced availability, and loss of these are two things: increased availability, reduced availability, increased demand, and that sort of pressure you can think of and then write it down. Then what state it is now? What state is now? How do we tell the state? How much sand is being removed? What is the sand availability at present? What is the sort of accretion rate? How much accretion it happened? So yesterday, Dr. Patmalal must have told some statistics on that. How much of sand is removed, and after removal, how the photograph which I have showed is the state. Okay, that is the state of the river ecosystem, and which shows that sand is totally removed. So much of volume of sand has been removed. In Pamba Basin, as I understand, it is almost about 82% more than the inflow of sand has been mined out. That led to this thing. So after that, then mining was stopped, and then these days there is some accumulation of things done, but then the accumulation is much lesser than the original river ecosystem status. So that is how the state is. What are the impacts?
Loss of biodiversity.
Pardon?
Loss of biodiversity.
Uh,
Shrinkage of the river.
uh,
Loss of nearby vegetation.
that is biodiversity includes that also. Okay. Okay, you can be more precise. So vegetation, repair in vegetation loss. Microclimate is general, any sort of situation, microclimate impact will be there. Okay, fine. Floods. Loss of perenniality of river flow. open wells will run dry. So naturally the reversal of gradient, because if the level of river water is higher, naturally the flow will be towards the well on the banks of the river. Here there will be reversal of gradient of water, groundwater. Yes, then
Underground water table might go down.
this is what she said.
And slowly the riparian edge will also change. The condition of the edge, the riparian vegetation will also
Yes,
slowly degrade.
yes.
You can see plant succession in some areas.
Huh?
You can see plant succession happening.
So a lot of impact, both in the reduction of resources as well as reduction of groundwater, reversal of the flow regime. There will be reduction in the biodiversity. There will be reduction in the vegetation, and so many things you have said. Okay, so we have identified the impacts. Then what next? Once we identify the impacts, what is the next step? Huh? Action. What action? No, we have to classify the impacts, no? I said 2-3 type of impacts, whether it is beneficial or adverse, whether it is long term or short term or long term, whether it is reversible or irreversible. So now take one impact. Somebody said groundwater, lowering of groundwater table. That's what you said, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, lowering of groundwater. Whether it is beneficial or adverse? Adverse. Whether it is reversible or irreversible? Pardon? Why? How can it be reversible?
It is irreversible, sir, because there is no sand.
Ah.
Now there is no sand.
Ah.
So the population capacity is gone down.
Ah.
So to get the sand back, it will take so many years
Ah.
for the river to become natural course.
Ah.
So I think it is not immediate reversible.
I said only reversible and irreversible. I did not say immediate. So let us say it is reversible, because provided if there is sand, if we are not going to touch that river at all for some years, so many years, then it will reverse. So it can be reversed anyway. So we can take it as reverse, but not in a very limited planning period. And whether it is a long term or short term impact? It's a long term impact. Okay. So now, having identified the type of impacts, we should find out whether we can mitigate this or not. Can we mitigate this? Yes. You said so many impacts. First you said, what did you say first? It is not, okay, we can say groundwater table is going down. That is what you said. How can we mitigate this?
You restore the gradient to how it was earlier.
Pardon?
When you reduce sand mining, then over time the gradient will be reversed.
We have got the status. I showed that status in the photograph. Now that is the situation. And we said that these are the impacts, that lowering of groundwater table on the banks. Now can the groundwater table regain the original shape? How can you regain that? Eh?
You can stop the sand mining activity.
There is no sand. It's all taken. We have taken out.
Like it will not vary completely, right? It depends upon the locality also.
So I have showed you the map. The entire sand, even a piece of sand is being taken out. There is nothing left. Pardon?
Can we transport soil sand back from the same river which is depositing in the lake?
You don't have to transport. River itself will transport, provided sand is there. So leave the river as such. Sand will come and fill up. Okay. As the sand gets filled up, naturally the ecosystem start regaining its integrity. Okay. So that happens. But then you have to leave that system like that. That is one. So it is a reversible thing on a long term basis. Okay. So we have to have a action plan for that. What is the action plan?
Yeah, so you have to ban.
Huh?
Is to know not
No action. Okay. How can no action take place?
We have to ban.
prevent people from acting.
You said. So it needs to be banned. People should not take that action at all. So naturally it has to be So similarly, any other impacts you said? So for which, so like that, you go on identifying what are the type of impact and what you can do for mitigating that. Groundwater you said, water table you said. We said that on a long-term basis, sand will come and fill up. Yes, yes, to me.
Sorry, I was saying it probably already is banned, but that's not the issue of banning or non-banning. It's
Madam, why do you go and sit in the back side? There are so many front seat available. I'm an old man. My ears are functioning for 24,000 days. It's now getting deteriorated.
they're not bringing the microphone.
There are so many seats here.
Use mic.
Sir, I was saying, banning might not solve the problem because it might already be banned, but the issue is enforcing the ban, which is always the problem, making sure that there are people there who stop the illegal mining of sand. So it's not so much banning if there's no one there to ensure that it's that banning is.
Then what else?
Um,
We have decided no more taking of sand. We leave no action. That's what she said. We leave the river to its fate.
we can't. That is controlling what people do. We can create
How do we control?
Community vigilance,
yeah.
Two ways.
through community vigilance.
One is awareness. Another one is enforcement. Both are required.
Yes.
So these two actions. So there has to be a plan for that, or a project for that, or whatever action for that we are taking. Then what are the other actions? You said the impact is that groundwater table goes down. Is there any way that groundwater table can be rejuvenated?
Yes,
How?
we can make temporary
Like
burns, temporary burns to hold water.
What are the techniques? Yes, please. Okay, so that means you can recharge the groundwater, and you found that the river rejuvenation, leaving the river for no action, is possible, but on a long-term basis. That river sand has to come and deposit there, and that river has to take its own course of action and its own time to rejuvenate itself. But there can also be quick actions like recharging artificially the groundwater and then bringing the water table up, so that the water flow, which by conserving water in that way or recharging water, you are reducing the overland flow and making the water flow through the bottom. So there the permeability and porosity is low, so naturally the flow will be very slow. So thereby you will be able to lift the water table considerably. So that's a very quick action that's possible. So these are the two districts. Yes.
So in this case, I think one must also look more broadly at livelihoods, because I met someone who made a living from mining sand, and when the floods happened, he said it's because we are not mining sand and all that sand is lying there that it's getting flooded. So I think even livelihoods ultimately have to be worked into this scheme. If people are left without a means of living, then the chances of this continuing.
See, there are so many impacts or pressures and impact and pressure you can look at, and then go on building up. Say, for example, sand mining was livelihood for so many people. That's a beneficial impact. But they did not know that mining is an activity which is not sustainable. Mining is sustainable only when sand mining is sustainable only when sand is extracted to the tune of the flow. The flow is very, very limited. So that much sand only one can take. But the population, the requirement, the demand is so high that we could not limit that. Thereby, it also it was also providing livelihood to some people, but then they extracted sand in a much bigger fund and they ended the livelihood once for all. So that way also you can see. Yes.
Could I add something to this? In Kozhikode district in Kerala,
there were a lot of sand miners who had lost their jobs after 2007 when the Sand Mining Regulation Act came to be. So what they did there was the state's first community reserve. They started the same sand miners who were working in sand mining area. They were being trained to act as nature trail guides. So they shifted their job from something that's so environmentally degrading to something. They were being turned into nature guides, and they would guide tourists on canoes through mangrove trails.
Yeah.
So it's the very same region that they were affecting that they're now protecting.
So there can be many sort of action plans that one could think of to mitigate the environment. Yes, please.
Just one point. Mining itself is not a problem. Illegal and unsustainable mining is. So for most of the mining activities, government has licensing systems and they issue permits. So if people who are earning a livelihood out of them go buy that permit and take only that amount of sand, it's fine. So illegal mining is what is problematic. The second thing, when we talk about underground water level, we must also identify if that is just an underground water or an aquifer. Because if it is an aquifer and if that water is lost, it will be really, really difficult, or it might be irreversible to replenish that aquifer. So that distinction and that data, I think, is also important when we do recharge activities.
No, see, I differ from your statement. Aquifers are always rechargeable, provided we extract water to the safe field limit, limiting the extraction to the safe field. That is possible. Now here what happens? You are that aquifer is in continuity with the river water, and river water is going down. Naturally, the slope direction changes, or slope direction increases, or the gradient increases. More flow happens towards the river. So thereby the water table is coming down. Now you are recharging these are all very near surface aquifers. We are talking about dug wells, which are at a depth of say about 10 or 15 meters depth below the ground level. Even the deeper aquifers also, the recharge, the extraction and recharge should be to a very, very high magnitude. So that we don't talk about. Now we are talking about the dug wells on the banks of the river, which are used by the local people. The impacts are known to the local people much bigger. So there recharge is possible by artificial recharge, because that water taken out of the dug wells are very small in quantity, and it could be recharged during the rainy season. So it's not the sort of the aquifers that you are thinking of, Ganga basin or Kaveri basin and things like that. So such deeper aquifers, what you said is correct to a large extent, but these near surface aquifers, it could be recharged in a much better way. Okay.
That might be a distinction because
There is yes.
convention and law to deal with aquifer. And
Yeah.
different
Yeah. Okay. Then the responses. So according to the plans, we have to have the responses worked out, and we can have programs and plans for that. So this is what. So now I told you one issue, and then you suggested the pressure, driving forces, pressure, state impacts, and response. Now you identify one problem of the river, and then tell me the DPSIR. Tell. Yes, somebody suggest a problem other than indiscriminate sand mining. Water pollution. Okay. Water pollution is an issue. What are the driving forces? There is no industry. We are talking about the pollution. So, silently, one can define silently as a pollutant, but then here let us not. pollution is due to the sort of discharges from the household, from the markets, from the urban areas and things like that. Okay. So driving forces we can work out like that. Now what are the pressure? Now the water pollution has happened. What are the pressure?
The river do not have acidity capacity to absorb food state.
Assimilating capacity is lost. That is why pollution happens. Okay. Already it is lost. Huh? Water is polluted. What sort of pressure it applies on the environment? There is lack of water. There is lack of drinking water, lack of water for irrigation, lack of water for any other purposes that the river usually use. Is that even pressure? Then
Fish population.
the sort of what's that? The food. Loss of services to the habitats. Okay. That's how one can say. So like that you can find out the pressure. Of course, pressure and impacts are always slightly. There is a very minute line between pressure and this. But then one can, if you continue doing this exercise, one can very fast you can. Now what is the state? State means the status, the present water quality status, water pollution status.
The view.
We have to go to the magnitude of pollution.
You already come up with 64 or something, water quality.
I said some water quality index. Yesterday, Ajayakumar must have told something. Anything? Sir, anything? Status. Okay, sir. So what he was telling is that there was an industrial system which were not compliant with the sort of pollution control measures. So he was telling that if they told them to comply with the situation and all. So if there are 176 kilometer length of the Pampa river system, if we have to rectify the pollution problems, we will have to intervene at specific spots where the pollution happens. That's understood. Okay. We are talking about the state of the pollution. So yesterday you must have heard of Ajayakumar. Today I said about the water quality index. So that sort of data we need to explain what exactly this state of the ecosystem is. Then next is impact. What are the impacts? My time is running out, so I need to go fast. Health issues. Okay. Disease burden, increased disease burden, and impact. Then loss of biodiversity, impact. Okay.
The loss of biodiversity, there are organisms like filter feeders that actually help in purification.
Yeah. So you can find out so many such impacts. Now what are the responses? What can be? How can you solve this issue? You said so many impacts. All regarding water pollution, all are reversible. All are shorter. Okay. And all are adverse also. So now what are the responses or what are the action plans? You can no, see, he was telling that assimilating capacity is lost. That is why pollution happened. Can we regain the assimilating capacity? And if so, what should we do? Flow maintenance. Flow maintenance. So more water to flow into that. How can you bring more water into that? Rain you cannot generate. How can you do that? No. See, there are ways. Now, what happens during the rainy season, the entire water is collected and then flowing out. So, but then we have our forest. Forest hold water. 1 square kilometer of 1 hectare of forest holds so much of water. Probably James must have told you some sort of figure yesterday. So, there is a potential considerable quantity of water because of the spongy sort of soil that the forest has got. Other way is that each of the watersheds that I saw can be conserved. There we can have water conserved in the subsurface. And that water flow slowly to the river, through the smaller streams and then get into the stream. So thereby we maintain the permeability of the river. We allow more water to flow during the lean season. So we conserve, during the rainy season, we conserve quite a lot of water in the catchment area and then allow water to come to the stream during the lean season by making the water flow through the subsurface and conserving maximum water through providing check dams and things like that. So that's how we will be able to do, and we will be able to see that more water flows and thereby increasing the assimilating capacity and reducing the pollution load. So that sort of things. So similarly, all these environmental issues you can work out the driving force, pressure, state, impact, and the responses for that. You can work out that, and then you can develop the state of the environment of river ecosystem. Okay. So this is a very easy thing. So if you do this exercise with the local people or local panchayat or local district administration, you will be able to develop a good action plan for river management, and then convince people to take part in this and then go forward. That's how we can play. So now there has been various responses. Now one was we have taken up a Pamba River Action Plan, but then Pamba River Action Plan, like Ganga River Action Plan, it was only providing certain waste management systems, so thereby ensuring that no waste flow into the river. But practically nothing has happened, though the project has come up, so no waste management system has built up, and so the Pamba River Action Plan did not success to the extent we thought of. Secondly, we have taken legal measures and enforcement. In the case of sand mining, there was a legal measure, there was an act brought out by the state legislature, and the act was that any reverse sand mining to be taken out of the river should be based on an assessment done by the scientific study group. So based on that, two institutions were assigned to do that scientific studies, and then they estimate what is the sand available, and based on their recommendations, sand used to be taken. But then there illegal mining has taken place. That's how the entire sand is lost. So even if the scientific measure we brought in, so naturally the illegal encroachment into the sand mining activities led to severe reduction in the resources. Then we have the Green India Mission, thereby improved forest management activity has taken place. So catchment area protection was much better than we expected. But of course, there are certain problems in implementing Green India Mission and things like that, the flow of money. So though one of the responses in protecting the catchment and allowing the water to be conserved in that area, and then and slowing down the flow was to happen through this response, but then to some extent it did help, but not to the extent that we expected. Then the state government has drawn a program called Haritha Keralam Initiatives, thereby enabling the panchayats and municipalities to adopt better waste management systems, and also clean the water bodies and streams and all, thereby allowing more water to flow and conserve, and the watershed development programs and such other initiatives, thereby some sort of awareness creation among the panchayat, and also helping the panchayats to develop projects for conserving water, thereby the water flow to the river is improved. So these are some of the responses that we already have seen. Then further, we found that the river has increased, has to improve further. So we prepared another set of responses called catchment area treatment on the micro-watershed basis, solid waste management, liquid waste management, water quality monitoring. This has not happened. This is still a project mode. So why I brought this is that when we are doing this responses are of two types. One is after once we identify the impacts and then mitigation measures, naturally we will have to go for a phase called planning phase and implementation phase. The planning phase is also a response mechanism, but then all the planning that we carry out may not happen. So responses has two parts. One is the planning phase and the implementation phase. So phases are there. And now, in the planning phases, what we did was taking the local body as the unit of implementation. We developed a project for conservation of water through the catchment area treatment, as well as through the watershed conservation program, waste management program, and also water quality monitoring and things like that. These are some of the interventions. We felt that it could go into rejuvenating the river in a big way. So we took the Gram Panchayats who has money to implement such smaller programs. If they take smaller programs in their own area, naturally it will have a much bigger impact on the entire river basin system. So these are some of the Gram Panchayats we have on this river basin. And this is the sort of watersheds. If you take, now you can see, this is one of the small stream joining river from the Alda R in Malayalam means river. So Alda river, you can see, this is first order. These two are first order, going to the second order, and when it joins here, it is third order. And like that, the river goes on the building. Okay, agreed. So this one collected and this water gets discharged here. So this entire area, from wherever water comes to this particular stream, is called a watershed. Or you can see this map. All this ridges area, within this ridge, the entire water rainfall flows, it is collected and then flow to this particular stream like this. This is the discharge point. Or otherwise, this is another watershed which you can draw from here, and then whatever water is stored here, it flows to this. So this way, watershed-based intervention is one action that we have taken up for catchment area treatment and catchment conservation. There are about 73 sub-watersheds with area varying from 0.55 square kilometers up to 307 kilometers square. So these are some of the watersheds. So the biggest one, 370 square kilometer watershed is here. There are other bigger watersheds. There are very small watersheds like this. So for all the watersheds, we can have conservation programs. Yes. Pardon?
Just a quick question. Are all the
You can just reserve your question. I will come to you. So you can have biological and engineering treatment measures for all these watersheds through arable land treatment measures, then stone pitched contour bund, earthen bund, etc., agrostological measures, forestry, vegetation, hedges, and all such things, drainage line treatment. So many sort of activity we will be able to take up. Then structural stream bank stabilization, percolation ponds, renovation of pond, field channel, leading channel, diversion channel, water harvesting structures, resection of thodu drains, deepening of streams, kaya geotextiles to protect the stream banks. So some of the sort of interventions are like this. So you have the storage ponds where you can have rainwater harvested and used. You can have check dams, thereby having storage and improving the groundwater situation here. You can, during the lean season, you can let out that water, so it provides better flow into the river. So there are also other conservation activities like river recharge. These are recharge ponds, different types of recharge ponds. Then using local material, you will be able to store water and then allow more recharge into water. And there are many benefits that will provide, like reduced sediment yield of the river basins, mitigation of flood and drought, better waste management, and reduction of soil erosion. So such are the benefits out of the watershed-based interventions. Now, the second issue, we found out the waste management. Basically, source level treatment. Whatever waste is generated at the sources, we treat it there itself. And if it is not possible, then take decentralized or centralized treatment measures. And for all the sort of biodegradable waste, we can do like that. And other non-biodegradable waste, paper, plastics and things like that, we can have it a material collection facility, bring it to a resource recycling facility where we can recycle those things. And then we cannot, if we cannot treat it or recycle it, the entire that such waste, smaller in quantity, will go to engineered landfill. That is a sort of criteria developed for the panchayats. Then the waste management also, the technology we use is composting for the biodegradable waste, biogas plants. Then for septage, the toilet waste, etc., septage treatment plants, etc., like that. So some of the tools that we can use in doing composting and biogas making and all. So these are the decentralized waste management system. These are the non-biodegradable waste which we could collect in the material collection facility and then send it for recycling from the resource recovery centers. So putting all together, we have made a detailed action plan for the Pamba River Basin, where in the catchment area treatment, watershed conservation, it works out to be about 14,826 lakh. Waste management requires about 54,038 lakh. Riverbank protection about 947 lakh. Stormwater management is very expensive. That's for the panchayats and municipalities to construct the drains by the side of roads, which is very expensive, but then it is not a priority intervention initially. And water quality monitoring, which is very important, that we suggested that all the higher secondary schools having a chemical lab should be able to test the water quality of their locality. Or people, they can collect a small money from the people, and then people have a liberty to take their water sample to the school and get it tested. Similarly, the students also can continuously monitor the well water and stream water, etc., in that locality and generate a water quality database, how it improves through the interventions and things like that. So that cost about 271 lakh. Totally put together, almost about 1,478 crore rupees, out of which almost 55% of the money goes to stormwater. The rest of the money could be used to conserve the entire watershed and to manage the entire waste that is generated, and also providing a local facility for testing water so that people are aware of the quality, aware of how the quality can be maintained, and how aware of the impact of pollution that they make and things like that. So which will be facilitated through the higher secondary schools, which are available in all the Gram Panchayats in Kerala. So that is the sort of. So here I ends this thing. Now your question, please.
Sir, sorry, if there's pressure for time, it was a little bit of a tangential question, but I wasn't sure, when you showed that watershed map, I didn't know if that was something recently done and if that's done for all the rivers or if that's something that remains to be done in a lot of places along the rivers, that mapping of the watershed areas.
Somewhat recent in the sense that it's not last year or maybe about 5 years back. Your question is about how to develop a watershed map.
If that remains to be done largely in most rivers,
Some of the panchayats who are interested in conservation and things like that, they have done watershed map and then drawn the watershed action plan. And some of them are getting implemented, some places. But it all depends on the local demands. See, where there are severe shortage of water, naturally they will have to go for that. So they don't delay things like that. At places, there may not be that sort of requirement. Maybe at places, the problem is water quality, poor water quality or water pollution. Such places, they don't realize that there is a pollution. So unless and until they are told that your water is polluted and it has to be improved, and if it can be improved only by sustaining the flow to the streams regularly, and for which you have to take water conservation measures, then only it happens. But for these basin, entire watersheds are covered with action plan. Putting all together, I said the total quantity. There are about 78 sub-watersheds, and there are about 170 micro watersheds within that sub-watershed. For all, we have worked out what exactly in each place, what exactly to be done. which are the institutions wherein the major water storages can be there, or wherein the recharge pits can be constructed, and how the local people can engage themselves in constructing rain pits. Thereby, when the rain happens, water is collected and recharged to the ground. And where all we can have check dams, where all we need to protect the river banks through vegetative measures, etc. In Pamba River, it's almost about 11.7 kilometers, where there is a very severe problem of river bank collapse, which places we will have to have engineering measures to protect that river bank. So like that, we have very detailed survey and then worked out the action plan. Where? So now what we wanted is that this action plan, either this action plan or based on this action plan, the panchayats themselves prepare their own action plan and then get it implemented, for which we wanted government to give this as the foremost agenda to the panchayats in this particular river basin. If the government decides that this should be the foremost agenda, then this river will get rejuvenated very fast. So this is what we wanted to communicate, but then government has not taken that way. Government has, because there are so many other development issues which government has to find solutions. So naturally they did not concentrate on. So, but then we continuously tell the government. So this has been presented before the State Planning Board, before the Minister, before the Chief Minister and all, during the Haritha Keralam initiatives and things like that. So they partly agree, but then for want of money, they do not give importance to all these sort of action plans. But then the panchayats and municipalities who are interested are taking up. Nothing prevents them from taking this up, but then wherever we can give scientific support, there better way it is implemented. That's how it is.
So how do you develop one watershed map if it has not been done?
So first you have to identify the watershed boundary. How do you
GIS
identify
based.
watershed boundary?
Using GIS, sir, or is there any other way?
My time is up. 4 minutes. I
Cadastral
exceeded.
maps.
4 more minutes. Huh? Who? Rajiv, okay. Okay. Yes. First you identify the boundary.
Okay.
Then do a mapping to find out what are the issues. No, the DPSIR you can use. What are the driving forces? What are the environmental issues? What are the driving forces? Boss, you can sit here, front. What are the driving forces? What are the pressure? What are the state of the sort of environmental system? Then impacts, and then going for the mitigation of the impacts, and then bringing out the action plan.
That is the action plan. I'm talking about the map itself, sir.
Map. You can take either you can take a cadastral map or a topo sheet.
Yes.
And then you have a what's that? You go to a valley portion and then look at both sides. Then you will find the topmost portion. Go to the topmost portion and have all the topmost portion put in the map. You get the boundary of the watersheds. So that is the first boundary you can mark. Then within that boundary, what is the type of landform or the type of shape of the earth in that? It may be slopy, it may be a valley floor, it may be a hill area, so that you can put. The soil type you can put. What is how the land is being used? What are the type of land uses? Crops, the natural regions. Then where are the water sources? The streams, the ponds, the wells. All those things you can put. Then you can use that map for identifying the issues and then work on that.
Thank you, sir.
Should I stop here? Yeah. Do
Geological components like different we have different rock types. So is there any relationship between the rock types and the healthy recharge, about you can say percolation of the water in that rock type? Is there kind of relationship? in
Yeah,
that?
certainly.
Okay.
Because now see, there are many functions which the rock types. See, wherever there is hard rock, it will not have primary porosity. So naturally, the storage of water in the subsurface will be very limited. So wherever there is a soft rock like laterite or the sandstone, where from you come?
Maharashtra.
Huh?
Maharashtra.
Maharashtra. So
We have basalt.
so in basaltic regions, is also from Pune. So such area, the porosity will be limited to the fracture zones and things like that. So so the storage will be much limited unless and until there is considerable fractures and then porous areas and things like that. So it reduces. So depending on the geological formation in that area, the sort of storages, water storages in the basin will be lesser or higher. That's one thing. Secondly, we were talking about the sand availability in rivers, which in fact provide the perenniality of flow in a river. So if the sand is lost, naturally the storages of sand, storages of water in the sand, which actually facilitate the flow during the lean season, is lost. So if there is a hard rock terrain, which are highly weathering type, it brings in the inflow very fast. So if it is not, say, like basaltic rock, it will not weather that fast. Whereas a granitic type of rock like you find in Hyderabad, it weathers faster and it has got much more silica content also. So naturally the sand inflow will be much higher. That's how it is.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I stop here. Thank you very much for cooperating with me. Any more questions? Say this. No more. They got bored. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, yes. Yes. This one. It's a good picture, isn't it? I'll share this picture with you. Myself? Huh? Yes. This is my. How fragile we are? That is the question. This is from a place in near Trivandrum in Kerala, southern part of Kerala. It is not. No, it is not close to Panmudi. It's in the Midland area only. You can see this from the Google Earth. Yeah, I went to examine. See, I went to examine a quarry nearby. So looking at this and how I will be able to make use of this particular photo to prevent quarrying activity in that area. സാറിന് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പറയാമെങ്കിൽ എല്ലാവർക്കും കുറച്ചുകൂടെ